This is the Cuyahoga County Council regular meeting for Tuesday, June 12, 2012. Madam Clerk, will you call the roll?
The roll, Mr. Gallagher. Mr. Schron.
Here.
Ms. Conwell.
Here.
Mr. Jones.
Here.
Mr. Rogers.
Here.
Ms. Simon.
Here.
Mr. Greenspan.
Here.
Mr. Miller.
Here.
Mr. Brady. Mr. Germana.
Here.
And Ms. Conley.
Here.
Quorum.
All right, please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. For a moment of silence this evening, I'd like to call on first Ms. Simon, who is going to recognize Ms. Janet Cronenberg from her district, and then on Councilman Julian Rogers, who's going to recognize Mildred Brewer from his district. Ms. Simon and then Mr. Rogers.
Thank you, Madam President. I just wanted to take a moment to recognize the passage of Janet Cronenberg, who was a colleague of mine, and she served as a manager of the county's Witness Victim Service Center from 2006 until her death earlier this month. Janet was a tireless advocate for victims. She was instrumental in a number of local, state, and federal programs that supported the rights of children and victims of domestic violence, most notably the Defending Childhood Initiative and the Family Justice Center Project. Cuyahoga County has lost a passionate defender of justice, and we join her family and friends in mourning her passing.
And Mr. Rogers?
And I'd like to acknowledge the passing of Councilwoman Mildred Brewer, City Councilwoman in the city of East Cleveland, which is in my district. Ms. Brewer was a tireless advocate on behalf of seniors. She's a graduate of Glenville High School as well as Dyke College, and she helped lead many civic groups. She was president of at some point, she was president of the East Cleveland Library Board, vice president of the East Cleveland Citizen Coalition, consumer director of the East Cleveland Theater, and chair of the East Cleveland Welfare Reform Committee. And she was also president of 2 parent associations. We will miss Ms. Brewer for all of her tireless work, particularly on behalf of the city of East Cleveland.
Moving on to item 5, is there anyone signed in for public comment related to the agenda?
Yes, Madam President. Mr. Ken Lancey has signed in to address council.
Mr. Lance, if you come forward to the microphone, and you have 3 minutes. I know it's hard being a politician in 3 minutes.
Yeah, just like speed dating. All righty. County Council, County Executive Fitzgerald, thank you for the opportunity to say a few words tonight. Most recently, and you're all aware that there was an issue with funding one of the agencies, the county agencies that affects children. And I had an opportunity to get involved and to be able to do what I could do. However, my statement today goes on the side of a grandparent. I have an adopted child who's in the system, who my daughter had adopted 2 children from county services and children's services. And as a result, the 2 children, there was a little Caucasian girl, little African-American boy. The system, in 3 minutes, I can't give you but I'll give you the Reader's Digest quickly. The 2 children, when they were taken from the parents, should not have been together. And the reason I say this is that one was an infant and the other one was 4 years old. They were taken from an abusive situation. They were taken from a home where the father, i.e. person who was the father, was a convicted pedophile. He fell through the cracks in the system. He went to California. They adopted this child. This child came from the birth of a mother who was on crack, who had no idea of who the father was. They bring him to Ohio. He brings him to Ohio just so that he could groom him. And then 4 years later, the older sister in this house, which again is not related to the father, ends up filing, complaint, somebody on her behalf. Children's Services comes in that she was abused herself and molested. So the investigation ensues. The father stays in the home. The county finds out that this had happened They don't know how this has happened, but it's happened, so therefore, mother has a choice. Either get rid of the kids, get rid of the father or the husband. She got rid of the kids. So at this point, this little 10-month-old Caucasian girl gets pulled, little boy, they call them brother and sister. As a result, the system fails the little boy in as much as they say, well, he's okay, nothing happened to him. Historically, something did happen to him. His father was, the man he lived with was a convicted pedophile who went to California to get him. That should have been a red flag. It wasn't. The system failed him. He was abused. We only find that out after we adopt him. He'd already been in 3 different foster homes. Nobody recognized that there was anything of an issue with this child. But after having him for a year and integrating him into our family, he has a breakdown. And he has a breakdown in as much as a breakthrough, that he realizes why he's so angry, why he's so destructive, why everything that we've tried to give him in the love he couldn't receive. We find that out. We find that out through Children's Services because he sees them every week. And they say, well, this is pretty severe. We have to remove him. We'll put him in Berea's Children's Home, and we'll give him intensive therapy. During that intensive therapy, we expected to have him out for 90 days. We continue to see him. He ends up sharing he already molested the little girl that was his sister. Therefore, as a result, we can't get him back. Now, I'm here today to ask that County Counsel and County Executive Fitzgerald, I'm not here to criticize, I'm here to say the system has a lot of broken pieces and parts.
Yeah, and that was your 3 minutes, and if you could kind of get to the point, because
Okay.
this is the rule we give to everyone.
Simple point is, there's a book that was written by a Dr. Keck, Adopting the Hurt Child. The book should have been titled Adopting the Hurt and Broken Child. I would suggest, I would hope that you would all read it and develop a group that would look into some of the reasons why these children, and again, the issue of continuity is important. And as a result of the project that wasn't funded, the only option for the home was to send the kids back to juvie.
Okay, I think you need to synthesize. I know you have a point to make, and your time is
But
up.
my
If you
point is,
kinda
yeah, okay. but-
Synthesize it.
Yeah, well, my point is, hopefully there's a committee that can come together to be able to look in and make sure that funding, the shortfall never happens again. It is something that is detrimental to children, and I would hope they could do something for that, but also look into the way the system treats children when they're pulled from parents that have a record where they should never have been with to begin with.
Okay, I think this is going to be item number 15 on the agenda, and we'll address it then.
Okay,
Thank you
thank
very
you.
much, Mr. Lancy. The minutes of the meeting of May the 2nd, 2012 are in your packet and have been circulated. If everyone has had an opportunity to review them, and if there are no additions or corrections, I'd entertain a motion to approve the minutes as circulated.
So moved.
Mr. Greenspan, seconded by Ms. Conwell. Is there any discussion? All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, the ayes have it, the minutes are adopted. I just have a couple of brief announcements. This past Friday, I had an opportunity to go to Columbus to the statewide meeting of the County Commissioners Associations of Ohio. It was very interesting. Had an opportunity to meet people, county officials from all over the state to discuss various topics. So it was a very, very informative meeting. I hope that other council people have an opportunity to attend in the future. I'd like to recognize also the son of Hugh Shannon, our, who was the administrator at the medical examiner's office. His son, Matt Shannon, was featured in Cleveland.com this week for being a bone marrow donator, which is a wonderful thing, particularly in light of the stories on Robin Roberts on Good Morning America. So being a bone marrow donor is certainly an admirable thing. I'd like to commend Mr. Shannon and his wife for raising a very fine and admirable son who made a significant contribution to someone else's life. I'd like to point out that we have a volunteer this year in our office who will be working with us for the summer. Vince Freitas, he was with us last year, and he'll be volunteering and working essentially as our receptionist for the summer before going off to college in the fall, and it's a pleasure to have him. And then also on behalf of County Council, I'd like to say goodbye and Godspeed to Justin Bibb, who will be leaving the county. It was a pleasure working with you, and we wish you all good things. I mean, I think there's a pattern here. Bob Ivory went to California, and you're going to New York, so I don't know. This is not a good pattern. And then Melvin's laughing. We have to send you to Hawaii or something. You have to go south. You have to go someplace south, though. If you leave us. So anyway, Justin, thank you very much, and keep us posted on your good deeds. All right, the message from the county executive, Mr. Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Madam President. First, I just want to echo what Councilman Rogers and Councilwoman Simon said about Councilwoman Brewer and Janet Cronenberg, respectively. Councilwoman Brewer was just, for those of you that knew her, was just a real gentle person and a class act, and she will be missed in East Cleveland and the greater community. And Janet Cronenberg was, I mean, there are whole programs that never would have existed if she hadn't worked on them. Most recently, the Defending Childhood program. The county would not have received the designation it did from the Justice Department if it wasn't for her. She was the indispensable person in that whole process. And that was just the most recent accomplishment. She was just a really, she was just very passionate about those issues. So I just wanted to join in your comments with that. A couple other things briefly. I thought of this also. I didn't participate in your discussion earlier about the casino proceeds, but there were two just quick points I wanted to make. One is there was a ceremony last week. I think it was last Thursday with the Flats East Bank the Flats project. They had topping off. A couple of you were there. They had their topping off ceremony. And it really has become noticeable that downtown is changing. You can feel it, you can see it, it really is happening. I mean, there have been so many of these groundbreakings, there are so many to come, and the optimism and the vibrancy of downtown is really, it isn't cheerleading, it is real. You really can see it. There was a recent story on NPR that made their national program, actually, that we should have transcribed and sent out to you, but talking about Cleveland. One of the first national stories I've seen about how downtown Cleveland is becoming a destination, and that there's a long waiting list to just get an apartment in downtown Cleveland. This is so this conversation that we're having is very relevant. I also want to associate myself with the remarks that Councilman Germana have made previously. I'm proud of the discussion that has gone on and the way that council has conducted and manage that discussion. It's appropriate. It has not been parochial. The suggestions that have been made are reasonable suggestions. I may not agree with them entirely, but it hasn't been, to some people's disappointment, it actually has not been a heated discussion. It's appropriate. And even though, for instance, with Councilwoman Simon's amendment, I do agree with 50% of it, by the way, but I respect where it's coming from. On that point, by the way, I want you to know I did meet with the delegation for the Mayors and Managers Association, had a long meeting with them last week in my office, and we had a long discussion about this, and we said we're going to have sequels to that. So I won't go through everything that we talked about, but I tried to lay out what we've tried to do additionally for suburbs. You've already heard a lot of that. Some of them knew those things, some of them didn't. But I heard from them, and I do want to make a commitment to doing more for them. I'm not sold on that this is the mechanism to do that, but it was a very respectful and I think a hopeful discussion about this important issue. A couple other things briefly. One is there was a report on Channel 3 that was done by Tom Meyer about emergency response plans. I can see from some of your expressions that you didn't see it, and that's okay, because the implication from it was that the county has no response plan for a radiological attack. They kind of raised that as an issue. In the actual interview that I did, I told them, yes, we do. We have trained 2,400 first responders to respond to a radiological attack. We have the radiation detection equipment available. We have trained on it. We have done exercises associated with that. Somehow all of that ended up on the cutting room floor. If any council people have any questions about that, or they want to see our detailed plan about that, we are more than willing to provide that to you. But I just want to make sure that you knew that in case any constituents expressed any concern on that issue. Two other things briefly. One is, as you may know, and I know Councilman Germana knows because he was there, but Howard Meyer had his retirement ceremony, basically, but that we had the NOACA annual meeting. Howard is stepping down. Grace Galucci, who has been designated as the new head of NOACA, and I would just encourage council as we kind of enter into this new era with NOACA, although we have representatives on the board, you might find it helpful, I think, to engage with them as we kind of jointly help define what we do regionally on transportation and infrastructure issues. And then lastly, this is the second year now that we've had our summer fellowship program. We just started last week. Our fellows just started. They're assigned to various departments, and we can give you a briefing on where they're being assigned and what projects they're working on, and if there's anything in particular that you would like us to have assigned to them, they're going to be available for projects this summer. Thank you very much, Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. Fitzgerald. Item 9, reception of the report of submitted to council of the 5-year economic development plan update. Do we actually physically have that yet, or has it been presented?
It's in our packet.
Okay.
At the last Economic Development Commission meeting, there was the 5-year economic development plan update provided to us. We have to vote it out by the end of July out of council, so I intend to have first committee hearings on this at our next Economic Development Committee, which based on the calendar would be the 24th? I think 25th? Yeah, 25th of June at 3 o'clock. So that will be the first opportunity, and I know that Mr. Kelly and Mr. Benders will be, hopefully one of the two will be able to be there to bring everybody up to speed.
I thought you changed the time of that meeting from 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
We did for that particular occasion one time, but is there any, I'll check with my fellow members and see if there's a desire to go earlier with.
Yeah, 3 o'clock is not good for a lot of people, so.
Okay.
But anyway, this matter, item 9A, is referred to the Economic Development Committee. 6 o'clock.
Fine with me, it's after work.
I can go home. Well, 6 o'clock, actually, I'll go and walk my dog and come back. All right. Item 10, committee consideration of motions of council for first reading and referral to committee. Item 0012.
Motion number 2012-0019, a motion confirming the county executive's appointment of individuals to serve on the Gateway Economic Development Corporation of Greater Cleveland Board of Trustees and declaring the necessity that this motion become immediately effective. The individuals are William J. Reedy and Timothy Oftermatt.
This matter is referred to the Human Resources Committee.
Motion number 2012-0020, motion confirming the county executive's reappointment of Patricia Carey to serve on the Western Reserve Resource Conservation and Development Council and declaring the necessity that this motion become immediately effective.
This matter will go to the Human Resource Committee. Item 11, consideration of resolutions of council for first reading and referral to committee. Item 0097.
Resolution number 2012-0097, a resolution providing for submission to the electors of the County of Cuyahoga an amendment to Article 2, Section 4, and Article 3, Section 7 of the Charter of Cuyahoga County and declaring the necessity that this resolution become immediately effective.
This matter and the rest, and where we go through them, will be going to the Committee of the Whole on these charter amendments.
Resolution number...
Yes.
Madam President, we're going to be discussing these charter amendments in detail in committee, but I wanted to take just a moment and talk about why it is that we have them. As everybody knows, we're going to be starting a charter review process in September, and nine members are going to be appointed, and by the following July, they're going to submit a set of recommendations. However, in 2013, being a year that we otherwise do not have county-wide elections, we would incur a very substantial additional election expense if we put those charter amendments on the ballot in 2013. So that there's at least a decent chance that the amendments coming out of charter review might not get put on the ballot until 2014. And so because of how far that is away, we've developed the idea that when some specific issues have developed where we think that some changes to the charter might be indicated, that we should put some of the most important and urgent on the ballot this year for the public's consideration. And we have amendments that have come both from the council and from the administration, and we're going to hear them through this process and decide which of these amendments we should put on the ballot this year for the voters' consideration.
I thank you, Mr. Miller, for that explanation. And all of the items on item 11 that we'll be going through right now, these are proposed charter amendments that were proposed by councilpersons. Mr. Miller and Ms. Conwell has one, and I have one. So thank you. So item 0097 goes to the committee of the whole. You want to read item 0098?
Resolution number 2012-0098, a resolution providing for submission to the electors of the County of Cuyahoga, an amendment to Article 3, Section 10, Subsection 5 of the Charter of Cuyahoga County, and declaring the necessity that this resolution become immediately effective.
We'll go to committee of the whole.
Resolution number 2012-0099, a resolution providing for submission to the electors of the County of Cuyahoga, an amendment to Article 6, Section 2 of the Charter of Cuyahoga County, and declaring the necessity that this resolution become immediately effective.
Let's go to committee of the whole.
Resolution number 2012-0100, a resolution providing for submission to the electors of the County of Cuyahoga, an amendment to Article 9, Section 1 of the Charter of Cuyahoga County, and declaring the necessity that this resolution become immediately effective.
It goes to committee of the whole.
And resolution number 2012-0101, a resolution providing for submission to the electors of the County of Cuyahoga, an amendment to Article 11, Sections 1 and 3 of the Charter of Cuyahoga County, and declaring the necessity that this resolution become immediately effective.
And this also is referred to committee of the whole. Item 12, consideration of an ordinance for first reading and referral to committee. Item 0014.
Ordinance number 2012-0014, an ordinance adopting an equity plan for Cuyahoga County.
This matter has been proposed by Ms. Conwell, Mr. Rogers, and Mr. Miller, and they know they've been working on it quite diligently for some time, and I'm glad it's finally come on for the agenda, and we'll refer it to the Human Resource Committee. Item 13, consideration of a resolution for first reading and adoption or suspension of the rules, Rule 9A and Rule 9D, and 12A. Ms. Simon?
Madam President, I move we suspend the rules.
Second.
I moved by Ms. Simon and seconded by Mr. Gallagher to suspend the rules. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Madam
indicate-
President.
Yes.
Oh, I'm
Right,
sorry.
all those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Right, the ayes have it, the rules are suspended. Mr. Miller?
Move to
Oh, wait,
that.
wait, we got to read it first.
Okay.
Okay.
You're getting
Resolution
ahead of
number
yourself here, Mr. Miller.
Resolution number 2012-0102, a resolution amending the 2012-2013 biennial operating budget for 2012 by providing for additional fiscal appropriations from the general fund and other funding sources, for appropriation transfers between budget accounts, and for cash transfers between budgetary funds in order to meet the budgetary needs of various county departments, offices, and agencies, and declaring the necessity that this resolution become immediately effective.
Move to adopt.
Second.
I moved by Mr. Miller and seconded by Mr. Gallagher. Okay, Mr. Miller, and I know, and we discussed some of these, so we have some questions about these items.
Madam President, to my colleagues, most of this regular financial resolution is routine relating to the appropriation of money for grants and other routine transfers and appropriations. But there's two items that I would like to ask for more information and to bring to the committee and the public's attention. And the first question relates to the item where a significant amount of money is being returned from the reentry program, and because of the high amount of reentry needs and the fact that we were only able to serve a small portion of the reentry population, my question is why this money was not used.
And Mr. Miller, do you have a page on that?
I'm sorry, not immediately.
Okay, do you know the amount roughly?
Was something like $150,000 in that?
Madam President, members of council, Matt Rubino, Office of Budget and Management. The item that Councilman Miller is referring to was a $143,000 reduction in the appropriation level for officer reentry. And if I could get right into some background on that particular item. This is part of an ongoing review that OBM staff conduct, more specifically related to county executive agencies. And we look at their current obligated dollars, meaning dollars that are locked up in contracts from year to year. And we help them with an analysis and determine if some of those contracts or agreements are no longer being used. We work with the agencies to determine which contracts are, in a sense, aged and reduce the certified appropriation and then reduce that appropriation at the same time. So this is a case where we worked with the reentry to clean up some of the older contractual agreements they were no longer utilizing, and those programs are now using current budget appropriation levels and current contracts. So they had some stuff going back maybe 2 to 3 years they were no longer utilizing. So as part of our ongoing policy, when we review aged encumbrances that are related to contracts that are no longer active, we decertify the appropriation balance that's locked up by that contract, and then we do a corresponding decrease in appropriation, and that's the case here. So it's not necessarily a lower level of program or other items within the agency. It's merely reducing appropriation related to these older agreements.
So does this money, then, is it going to stay in reentry? Is this going to go back to the general fund? Because reentry is really something that we really need to work on. And is the reentry program going to lose this amount? Or?
Madam President, this represents amounts of contracts they are no longer using. They've moved on to current obligations to perform the same objectives, including the additional dollars that were placed in their budget as part of the 2012-2013 budget process. They are a levy-funded agency, so there is a substantial local share from the levy that funds their operation. So this would free up the ability to use levy dollars for ongoing or current contractual program use.
Well, what was the failure that these programs weren't utilized? I mean, is there somebody to blame? I mean, in other words, they gave a contract to a company, an agency to do something in reentry, and it wasn't done. Is that what you're saying?
No, Madam President. It's more that they had approved a contract in a prior year, whether it was last year or the year before, and they've moved on to new agreements, possibly with the same providers, possibly for the same programmatic use. This is cleaning up the contract
was the money
agreement.
not spent because the work
Correct.
wasn't done?
They were authorized to spend up to a certain level. In this case, these are not to exceed contracts, so they did not completely spend the amount
So
of
they
those
could have worked
agreements.
harder and helped more people, but they didn't. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm not saying that, Madam President.
Okay.
I think they have a certain amount that is set aside in each of those contracts, and they use those to deliver services within their programmatic mission, and they've moved on to new agreements in the current year. These are older agreements they're not utilizing.
Mr. Werner, I don't know if you can elucidate this or,
Madam President?
Yeah.
Can I make a comment on this?
well, I'd like to hear from Mr. Werner if he,
Well,
Go
can I
ahead.
respond to something you
Right.
said? Let me give you an example. And Mr. Werner, I can certainly talk about the same thing, but let's say we give a contract to an agency that's working on reentry issues, and it's in a not-to-exceed amount of $50,000. and they don't expend that much because it's a not to exceed amount. We may have a $15,000 amount there, but the contract is still open. It's been budgeted for up to $50,000. If the agency doesn't spend the full $50,000, first of all, it may mean that they've been more efficient in what they're supposed to do. It may mean maybe that agency could have submitted more claims or served more people. And we can look at that when we then reauthorize them, or at what amounts we should reauthorize them. But it doesn't mean that there's been, that services have been cut by 1 iota because they have not been in the reentry area. And it doesn't mean that somebody necessarily blew it, because you have a not to exceed amount that shouldn't be, is not a penny for penny accounting per program of what they're going to spend, because otherwise you have to constantly be coming back every time you have exceeded what your exact estimate is. The other thing, though, that I think just in a larger sense that I think is appropriate, and it might be underlying your concern and Councilman Miller's and others, is that we know we have a bigger challenge with reentry. We know that. And I think that, and one of the things that we have designated for 2012 is to have a discussion internally, which we've already started, and Mr. Werner could probably talk about this. We've already talked about how can we supplement or complement what we're doing. And we're doing that, we're coming at that in two different ways. Number one is we know we have more people that are being released from prison than ever before because of state changes in the state budget and the fact that they're trying to deinstitutionalize people to save money, and because the new sentencing guidelines, they're going to be sending less people. That's number one. Secondly, we've been having a dialogue now for several months about whether or not there are certain programs that it would make sense strategically for the county to put more money into because we save money in the long run. Now, that isn't exclusively reentry, but if you look at programs where an initial investment ends up saving society or the taxpayer money in the long run, there's two that immediately have gone to kind of the top of our list. And this is kind of a pay for success or pay for performance type of approach, and I've mentioned it before. One is placement in foster care, because the sooner you can get a placement, the better it is for the permanent placement, the better it is for the child and the more money you'll save. The second is the reentry programs, because if you can get somebody to successfully graduate from a reentry program, the recidivism rate goes from 40, 50% to sometimes 3 or 4%. So we're interested in supplementing what we're doing. As to whether or not these funds won't necessarily reside in the reentry budget, but the funds will be available, and if we want to expend them later in the year for reentry programs that we have redesigned or expanded, they would be available to do that.
Okay, Mr. Werner?
Members of council and the county executive, if I could just add to what the county executive and Mr. Rubino have said. I mean, I believe that the funding that's being decertified here is aged funding for services, or sometimes the startup for services that were established 2 or 3 years ago. The Office of Reentry, I think this is its 4th year in existence. Its first year was for planning, and then we began the provision of services. And there were some contracts early on that took, or programs I should say, that took a fair amount of time to get up and get going because they were new programs that hadn't been funded before, or we were supplementing existing programs so that they could bring on or they could take more referrals, but in the process of taking on referrals, they have to bring on more staff. So there is a lag time between the county's decision to fund a program and the ability of that program provider to be able to be at full service. So I think certainly from the Human Services Department, we share the county executives and your concern to make sure that we are using those dollars effectively. And I will tell you that Luis Vasquez, who runs the Office of Reentry, is a very good advocate for his office. I know that he would have raised it with me, with Mr. Gauntner, and ultimately with the county executive and the county executive chief of staff if he felt that this decertification was going to be harmful to his program. If, as the county executive said, we in the Human Services Department and the Office of Reentry can come up with new uses of dollars, I know that we'll get a receptive audience for consideration for the reallocation of those dollars back into reentry. But I don't think you have anything to be concerned about the office's current ability to serve the individuals who are currently seeking service within the existing contracts that they have in place.
Okay, thank you.
President? I would like to know what those dollars were actually used for. And if there are programs now, if you say that there are now replacing those, but what were those dollars used for?
Madam Chair of the Council, I don't have that information with me, but we can get you which contracts have been decertified and in what amounts. But again, it was likely, my guess would be, just based on the age of them, it was probably startup dollar or contracts that were literally just beginning that took a period of time to sort of get into gear, both with referrals as well as the provision of service.
I think it's an important issue, and it's something that we would like to know. Is it possible to hold something like this until we get the information we need? And
Mr. Germano?
Madam Chair, I think the message we want to send is that, departments don't have to be afraid to send some money back if they haven't spent it. I mean, we don't want to have this message that, hey, we better spend everything that, or we're not going to get it budgeted again. And in this particular case, I think the explanation was, last year, they didn't spend it. And that doesn't mean that we're not going to fund it. It's being returned because the year is over and they didn't spend it. Let's move on. The accounting side, they have an account, and if that account, they got to zero it out sooner or later. So, I mean, this is just an accounting function. It's not, I think the message we want to send is, if you don't spend all your money, don't feel like you've got to spend it so that council doesn't say, why didn't you spend that money?
Well, Mr. Germano, I think the concern is that Mr. Jones and I and Mr. Miller all had is we were just concerned that there was no diminution of services. And I think we got an explanation, but I think we could call in Mr. Vasquez and, talk to him about it and get some more details. But I know he's a very diligent advocate for reentry, so we could actually talk to him about it.
and I don't desire to hold the item, but I would like to know. So if we could get that information.
Madam Chair to the council, we will get the entire council that detail.
All right. And Mr. Miller, did you have another question?
I did. I have one more. And just the very next item, item number Z on page 103, regarding the $5 million going to the prosecutor's office from the delinquent real estate tax assessment. Just would like a little bit of explanation of where that money comes from and how it's going to be used.
Madam President, to Councilman Miller, the question regarding the $5 million appropriation request for the prosecutor, that is the prosecutor's DTAC fund. So what the prosecutor has requested is to appropriate $5 million of the reserve in their DTAC fund. I'll back up and explain what their DTAC fund is. The county has a 5% DTAC fee. This is the original DTAC fee, delinquent tax fee, or delinquent property tax fee. This is separate from the 5% that was approved last year for the land bank. This is the original 5%. That 5% is split 50-50 between the county treasurer, who has a separate fund, and the county prosecutor, and then to use those dollars for foreclosure prevention and other related programs. The prosecutor's fund has a balance of about $6 million, and they've requested to appropriate $5 million, giving them the ability to transfer up to $5 million to the county land bank. The county land bank is going to utilize those dollars to match for the state attorney general settlement dollars that are being distributed as we speak this year for additional foreclosure and demolition and other improvements in large counties. So essentially, prosecutor has discretion over these funds per ORC. We're requesting that we appropriate the reserves in that amount, and then they'll utilize them for those purposes. Again, really to scale up the activities the county land bank is already undertaking, and to take advantage of these one-time settlement dollars that are going to roll through the state attorney general's office.
Madam President,
yeah.
Getting back for a minute to the reentry, my comment would be that if at the time the programs didn't have the scale and the capability to effectively spend all the money, we certainly would not want them to spend it. So So I agree with Councilman Germana in that respect. But on a general level, my belief is that the county has some excellent reentry programs that have been proven to help people and reduce recidivism substantially. But for whatever reasons, only a relatively small percentage of the reentry population fully take advantage of the best programs. And I think over time that it needs to be one of our projects to find ways to fully engage this population and get them into these programs and as the county executive alluded to, and so I think we need to work on that on an ongoing basis.
All right, thank you, Mr. Jones. Mr. Greenspan.
Thank you, Madam President. A question on these, getting back to the $5 million. Are these funds dedicated for a specific purpose when the prosecutor has direction over them?
Madam President, these funds are dedicated or earmarked per ORC for programs related to foreclosure prevention and other related items. There's been a variety of foreclosure prevention programs the county's undertaken since about 2005. The use of this DTAC fee has helped build those up over the past years as foreclosure and the resulting damage it's caused has become more prevalent challenge for the county. So it's fairly restricted and a narrow use, and I think the idea of appropriating these dollars, transferring them to the land bank to do continued work on redevelopment and demolition to continue clearing a lot of the issues related to vacant properties and abandoned properties is right in line with what the ORC prescribes.
Madam President, can these funds be, let me ask, before I ask that question, how much money is left in the prosecutor's DTAC fund after this money is transferred?
Councilman Greenspan, there'll be about $1 million left.
Okay. Can the prosecutor or the administration or council stipulate how these $5 million are to be spent with the land bank, or is it goes into the general land bank budget and they're able to appropriate as they see fit?
Councilman Greenspan, I think we are restricted as far as directing the prosecutor how to utilize the funds, and then what happens subsequently to being transferred to land bank. I don't think I'm equipped to give you a more specific answer than that, but from what I understand, no, that it's fairly straightforward in the code of what we can use the dollars for.
Okay, so this, Madam President, then this will put the land bank's number this year to 12 million then, correct? The 7 that we appropriated by legislation.
Correct, if we're using that funding cap plus this transfer of revenue.
Great. I hope this significantly helps the land bank in its efforts. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other questions on item 0102? All right, it's been moved and seconded. Are everybody prepared to vote? All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, the ayes have it. Item 14, consideration of resolutions for first reading and referral to committee. These are the other half of the proposed charter amendments, and these are been brought by the executive. And let's see, we start with 0103.
Resolution number 2012-0103, a resolution providing for submission to the electors of the County of Cuyahoga an amendment to Article 2, Section 2.031 and Article 9, Section 4 of the Charter of Cuyahoga County, and declaring the necessity that this resolution become immediately effective.
This goes to the committee of the whole. Go ahead.
Resolution number 2012-0104, a resolution providing for submission to the electors of the County of Cuyahoga an amendment to Article 5, Section 2, Section 7, Article 10, Section 1 of the Charter of Cuyahoga County, and declaring the necessity that this resolution become immediately effective.
All right, that's the two proposals by the executive, and we'll go on to item 0105.
Resolution number 2012-0105, a resolution declaring that public convenience and welfare requires resurfacing of Solon Road from Maple Street to Solon North Corporation Line in the villages of Bentleyville and Chagrin Falls Total estimated construction cost, $1,500,000. Finding that special assessments will neither be levied nor collected to pay for any part of the county's costs of said improvement, and authorizing the county executive to enter into agreements of cooperation with said municipalities in connection with said project.
May I go to Public Works?
Resolution number 2012-0106, a resolution declaring that public convenience and welfare requires reconstruction of Pleasant Valley Road from Brecksville Road to Kitchler Lighting Drive in the City of Independence. Total estimated construction cost, $2,614,000. Finding that special assessments will neither be levied nor collected to pay for any part of the county's costs of said improvement, and authorizing the county executive to enter into an agreement of cooperation with said municipality in connection with said project.
May I go to Public Works?
Resolution number 2012-0107, a resolution making an award and requisition number 23394 to Fabrizi Trucking and Paving Company Incorporated in the amount not to exceed $806,847.80 for rehabilitation of Prospect Road Culvert Number 9 in the city of Strongsville. Authorizing the county executive to execute the contract and all other documents consistent with said award in this resolution, and authorizing the county engineer on behalf of the county executive to make an application for allocation from county motor vehicle $5 license tax funds in the amount of $645,478.24 to fund said contract.
May I go to Public Works?
Resolution number 2012-0108, a resolution authorizing a revenue-generating agreement with City of North Olmsted for maintenance of storm sewerage systems located in County Sewer District Number 7. Authorizing the county executive to execute the agreement and all other documents consistent with this resolution, and declaring the necessity that this resolution become immediately effective.
May I go to Public Works?
Resolution number 2012-0109, a resolution establishing County Sewer District Number 3A, located in the city of Shaker Heights, in accordance with Ohio Revised Code Sections 6117.01 and 6117.03, effective July 1st, 2012, authorizing a revenue-generating agreement with said municipality for maintenance of storm sewage systems located in said sewer district for the period July 1, 2012, through December 31, 2012, authorizing the county executive to execute the agreement and all other documents consistent with this resolution, and declaring the necessity that this resolution become immediately effective.
This matter go to Public Works.
Resolution number 2012-0110, a resolution making a revenue-generating award and requisition number 22467 to AVI Food Systems Incorporated for food service operations at the Cuyahoga County Justice Center Cafeteria for the period July 1, 2012 through June 30, 2017, authorizing the county executive to execute the contract and all other documents consistent with said award and this resolution.
This matter will go to the Finance Committee.
Resolution number 2012-0111, a resolution making a revenue-generating award and requisition number 22321 to DLAJ Incorporated for coffee and limited beverage and food service operations at the Justice Center Galleria for the period July 1, 2012 through June 30, 2017, authorizing the county executive to execute the contract and all other documents consistent with said award and this resolution.
This matter will go to the Finance Committee.
Resolution number 2012-0112, a resolution authorizing an economic development loan in the amount not to exceed $1,260,000 to Swift Filters Incorporated for construction of a facility at 24040 Forbes Road, Oakwood Village, authorizing the Deputy Chief of Staff of Development or Director of Development to execute all documents consistent with said loan and this resolution.
This matter will go to Economic Development.
Excuse me. Resolution number 2012-0113, a resolution authorizing the issuance of not to exceed $21 million County of Cuyahoga, Ohio, health care facilities, mortgage revenue bonds, Series 2012, Menorah Park Center for Senior Living, Wiggins Place Project, for the purpose of, 1, refunding the outstanding principal amount of Series 2003 revenue bonds that were issued to provide funds to assist Menorah Park Center for Senior Living in financing costs of Wiggins Place, and 2, providing funds to make improvements and expansions to Wiggins Place, authorizing the execution and delivery of a base lease, a trust indenture, and an assignment to secure and provide for the payment of the bonds, authorizing the execution and delivery of a bond purchase agreement, and authorizing the execution and delivery of certain other documents and actions in connection with the issuance of such bonds.
Let's go to economic development.
Resolution number 2012-0114, a resolution making awards on requisition number 23233 to various providers for SAP Human Capital Management Professional Services, authorizing the county executive to execute the contracts and all other documents consistent with said awards and this resolution, and declaring the necessity that this resolution become immediately effective. 1, with Sage Group Consulting Incorporated in the amount not to exceed $890,000 for the period July 2nd, 2012 through July 1st, 2014, and 2, with Unify Solutions Incorporated in the amount not to exceed $110,000 for the period July 2nd, 2012 through July 1st, 2013.
This goes to human resources.
Resolution number 2012-0115, a resolution authorizing an agreement with Mayfield Village for participation in the Cuyahoga County Benefits Regionalization Program for the period June 12, 2012 through December 31, 2014, authorizing the county executive to execute the agreement and all other documents consistent with this resolution, and declaring the necessity that this resolution become immediately effective.
This matter will go to human resources.
Resolution number 2012-0116, a resolution adopting the annual tax budget, including the Cuyahoga County Library budget for the year 2013, and declaring the necessity that this resolution become immediately effective.
This matter will go to finance.
Resolution number 2012-0117, a resolution making awards on requisition number 22544 to various providers for the Staff Secure Shelter Program and Placement Planning Day Report Services for various time periods, authorizing the county executive to execute the contracts and all other documents consistent with said awards in this resolution, and declaring the necessity that this resolution become immediately effective as printed on the agenda items 01 and 2.
This matter will go to justice affairs.
Resolution number 2012-0118, a resolution authorizing amendments to contracts with various providers for placement services for the period October 1, 2011 through June 30, 2012 for additional funds, authorizing the county executive to execute the amendments and all other documents consistent with this resolution, and declaring the necessity that this resolution become immediately effective for the contracts of providers and in the amounts as printed on the agenda items P1 through 3.
This matter will go to Health and Human Services.
Resolution number 2012-0119, a resolution authorizing and directing the Cuyahoga County Fiscal Officer to make the necessary levy pursuant to Ohio Revised Code Section 5901.11, and declaring the necessity that this resolution become immediately effective.
This matter will go to the Finance Committee, and is that the budget for the Veteran Service Commission?
Yes.
Okay. Item 15, committee reports and consideration of resolutions for second reading adoption under suspension of the rule. We need a motion to suspend Rule 9D. Ms. Simon?
President, I move we suspend the rules.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Simon, seconded by Mr. Gallagher to suspend the rules pursuant to 9D. Any discussion? All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Madam Chair, if I may interrupt, the rules would not be suspended for item number 15A, which has been requested to be held at the request of the county executive.
Okay, all right, I was going to do that next. Okay, so this does not apply to 0086. So the ayes have it, the rules are suspended. As the clerk just said, item 0086 is going to be held at the request of the county executive. All right, item 0087.
Resolution number 2012-0087, a resolution declaring that public convenience and welfare requires replacement of Rockside Road Bridge number 3.23 in the City of Independence. Total estimated construction cost $4 million, finding that special assessments will neither be levied nor collected to pay for any part of the county's costs of said improvement, and authorizing the county executive to enter into an agreement of cooperation with said municipality in connection with said project.
Move to adopt.
Moved by Mr. Jones and seconded by Mr. Schrein. Any discussion on this? This matter has been to the Public Works Committee. All right. All right, all those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, the ayes have it. Item
Madam
zero.
President?
Yes.
May I ask for a clarification on item number 15A? Was this item withdrawn, or is it simply
held.
going on second reading?
No, it's being held by the executive. That's my understanding. Madam Clerk, do you want to?
It's my
Yep.
understanding that it's just being held, and so neither will it have second reading, nor is it being withdrawn.
So it's simply being
Held.
held back in
Right.
abeyance? Okay.
Right. Okay. Item 0088.
Resolution number 2012-0088, a resolution making an award on requisition number 23213 to Terrace Construction Company Incorporated in the amount not to exceed $2,197,758 for the sewer and lateral repair program for various county sewer districts, authorizing the county executive to execute the contract and all other documents consistent with said award and this resolution.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Jones and seconded by Mr. Germana. This matter also has been the Public Works Committee and had a full hearing. Is there any discussion, anything we need to know about it? Yes, Mr. Germana?
Madam Chair, first of all, I'd like to add my name as a sponsor of this. These
I
funds.
think you're already on there as a sponsor.
I'm just making sure.
You're right. Must be in Parma.
Well, it's Parma and most of the, I think it's a majority of the cities in the county do have a partnership with the sanitary engineer. And this is allowing Terrace Construction to have an amount not to exceed $2,197,000, so that as the projects are needed, the sewer funds from the cities are actually going to go to pay for this. But we're authorizing the contract because the county is doing the work, for the various cities.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion on this? Any other information? All right, all those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, the ayes have it. Item 0089.
Resolution number 2012-0089, a resolution making an award on requisition number 22973 to Perk Company Incorporated in the amount not to exceed $3,212,023.08 for resurfacing, restoration, and rehabilitation of Snow Rockside Road from Broadview Road to Lombardo Road in the cities of Parma and Seven Hills. Authorizing the county executive to execute the contract and all other documents consistent with said award in this resolution, and authorizing the county engineer on behalf of the county executive to make an application for allocation from county motor vehicle $5 license tax funds in the amount of $642,404.61 to fund said contract.
Move to adopt.
Moved by Mr. Jones, and who was the second?
Mr.
Germana. All right, any discussion on this one? All right, all those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, the ayes have it. Item 0019.
Resolution number 2012-0091, a resolution making awards and requisition number 21514 to various providers for residential treatment services for the Youth and Family Community Partnership Program for the period January 1, 2012 through December 31, 2013, authorizing the county executive to execute the contracts and all other documents consistent with said awards in this resolution, and declaring the necessity that this resolution become immediately effective with the providers and in the amounts not to exceed as printed on the agenda items E1 through 8.
Moved by Ms. Simon. Seconded by Mr. Rogers. Any discussion on these matters?
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I'm just wondering, This is mid-June, and this contract that we're approving is from January 1 through December 31. I'm just wondering, we're halfway through.
Well, Mr. Jermaine, I had the same question because I think we asked this, probably the very same question on the very, very first council meeting that we had a number of these contracts that come up and, they're ex post facto, they're after the fact. So we have talked to the administration about this. In most of the cases, as soon as we get the information, we put them on the agenda and have them in committee as soon as possible. But, I mean, there's some other glitches. I think Ms. Simon had a meeting about it, and she can probably elucidate better than I can.
Thank you, Madam President and Councilman Germana. In fact, the discussions have been ongoing since actually we came into office about the new process, the Novus, and everybody getting accustomed to that. Specifically with regard to these contracts, when we had our Justice Affairs Committee over a week ago, we discussed what the process is, why it's taking so long, and recognize that, of course, these are late in the game. So as a result of these discussions, I had a meeting with all of the stakeholders and people who were involved with this last week, and it went really well. And we're going to look for solutions to why this is taking so long, rather than looking backwards and pointing the finger, because everybody has some, I think, I don't want to call it blame, but there's, everybody has some role in why this is hold up, some more than others. But as far as I'm concerned, I think we just need to move forward. And one of the solutions we looked at is something to establish a master contract system, rather than waiting for all these contracts to come together at one time, to perhaps find a different way to do this, because sometimes one provider might take longer to give information and it just has a snowball effect. So something that we looked at was this master contract system that I think everybody's in agreement that we're going to explore that for the next round. And you'll see on the agenda tonight, there's more contracts which will be more timely. So we are addressing it and hopefully moving forward instead of, trying to figure out what went wrong and why. I think I'm past that.
Council President?
Yes.
If I could, to Mr. Germain, it's very involved, but I would just mention two things that I've seen. One is that the process is extremely bureaucratic. There's no question about it. And Jeff Mowry has a chart that he could share with you about all of the different points of contact when it comes to granting of a contract from beginning to end. And it looks like some kind of Rube Goldberg machine or something, but there's literally a couple dozen steps that have to be gone through. Now, some of those steps make sense because you want to have oversight and you want to have input from people that should have input, but it doesn't have to be that much. And we're talking about, in accordance with what Councilwoman Simon is talking about, we're talking about having a much, much, much more streamlined process. But that isn't the whole reason. So the process is always slow when everybody does what they're supposed to do. The problem is not everybody has been doing what they're supposed to be doing along those 24 parts. So for those, and there's some council members that sit on the Board of Control, we had a long discussion about this the other day. There's been a decision that's been made by some entities, and it's mostly is the court system, but not exclusively, but mostly it's the court system, where there are certain requirements that a vendor has to, paperwork requirements that they have to fulfill before they can become a vendor. Some court systems have decided to allow the service to go forward before the paperwork is completed. That means that they're performing the service, but they're not being paid because we can't pay them until it is complete. The answer that we got at the Board of Control the other day was that the services are so vital that they were afraid there was going to be a delay in the service. So they might tell them, well, the service was supposed to start, you're supposed to get your paperwork in by January 31st, but a number of them didn't, but they wanted to make sure there was no interruption in service. So they let the contract go forward even though the payment hadn't been made. And when I ask, and we have had this discussion, as those of you on the Board of Control, and my patience with it is basically at an end, I must say. But we, you know, one of the questions I asked was, why don't you just tell them they cannot have the contract unless they fulfill the paperwork? And the answer was, well, they're not businesses, and we cannot, and that's almost a direct quote, they're not businesses, and they cannot be expected to abide the way a business would. And I said, they may be social service providers, but they are fulfilling a business function. They are entering into a legal contract. And we cannot have people doing services for the county and then just saying, well, we're going to provide payment for you somewhere down the road. Because, first of all, it's making a mockery of the Board of Control and council approval process. That's number one. And secondly, it puts the county in an impossible legal position, because you're having somebody perform a service that they haven't been paid for, and if you decide later that you don't want to pay them, guess what? There's a thing in the law called quantum merit. You're not supposed to be the free recipient of somebody else's labor. If you don't want their labor, you're supposed to tell them, we don't want your labor, not we decided to take your labor and then pay you later. And so my suggestion was to tell any of the providers, if you have not complied with our requirements at the beginning of this admittedly too bureaucratic process, but if you, and I'm not suggesting that would solve all of the problems, but if you just told them that at the gateway to it, if you haven't fulfilled all these requirements, you cannot be certified to do any work. I said, if you tell them that it's flexible, you're going to have some entities that are going to push it as far as they can push it. But if you tell them you can't do work until you submit to these requirements, then I think that would make a big difference. Is that going to be the total solution? It's not going to be the total solution, because it's still too slow. Even all the entities that did everything right, it's still too slow. So we can try to fix those. But we have to, no matter who the provider is and no matter how great and important their work is, we have to have a common set of expectations for vendors, whether they're providing a service to a child or whether they're providing road salt. It doesn't matter. They have to comply with our contractual requirements, or else the system, it puts the members of the Board of Control and this council in an impossible position. Because your only option is to just say, no, we're not going to pay for something where we've been receiving the work for 6 months.
I just want to make it clear that the council has always been very diligent on these. As soon as we get them, we send them to committee, we have hearings on them, and we put them on agenda. We've passed things under suspensions of the rule that we weren't really crazy about passing on the suspension rule, because we knew the services were so vital. So, you know, we're here, we're available. If we have to have special meetings or whatever, we're here. But so that, you know, I don't think the council can be blamed for any slowdown in any of these processes.
I have never heard from anyone that knows the way the process works that they're delayed because of council. They have generally been delayed because the Novus system is very burdensome. The approval processes goes through many different twists and turns, and there's many people's approval that's required, and because there are gatekeeping problems in terms of vendors providing the information in a timely way before they expect to start their work. The council has been extremely acceding to requests when we've said, this is something vital, it has to go forward, can you suspend the rules? There's been no problem at all, as far as I know, with the county council.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that council doesn't take
No,
any
there's
blame.
been no problems at the Board of Control either.
Okay.
I mean, we're not, now, have we ever delayed something at the Board of Control? Yes. If we have a question about the propriety of a contract, the Board of Control has not hesitated to say, we want to hold this. That's different. That's a policy decision. These are things that there's really no policy dispute over. They're just taking too long.
Mr. Germano?
Madam Chair, thanks for that explanation. One of the things I was concerned about is I was worried that maybe some services were falling through the cracks because we didn't get this done. So that was more than half of what my concern by asking the question. I'm glad that we're working on it. And at least from my point of view, you know, the weight of the council is with you, agreeing that the system should be tightened up.
This is, if I could, just one more comment. Let me give you a specific example, okay? So psychological services provided by either a psychologist or a psychometrist in one of the branches of the court. This has happened repeatedly. The services are being provided, whether it's a prisoner referral or whatever it might be. The services are being provided. There hasn't been any interruption in service. But what we've been told repeatedly is we'll get one of these contracts in front of a board of control, and we'll say, why are we paying? And by the way, some of these psychologists, some of the agencies are getting frustrated, or individual providers are getting frustrated. But what we've been told is, well, some of them just haven't turned in their paperwork. Some of them are sole practitioners, and they're not used to it. You know, you can't do that. You can't do that. If you want to do the work, then you're going to have to go through, you know, you can't say, well, I'm kind of above the business process. Just can't do it. And it's been going on for too long. We've got to bring this to a head. I had a little bit of a conversation with Judge O'Malley. This is not limited to juvenile court, by the way. I don't mean to say that. Has it happened in juvenile court? It has. I just had a chance to have a little bit of a chat with Judge O'Malley, and we're gonna work this out. We're gonna fix it. We're not interested in assigning blame. What's happened has happened. We're gonna fix it, and if we don't fix it, then we should be held accountable for it. But I know that they're frustrated by it, and we have different expectations sometimes than what they were used to from the county before, because the county didn't have a county council system. They didn't have a board of control the way we do. They didn't have our, I think, justified expectation of oversight of some of these things. These are frustrating to them. It does take longer. Oversight takes longer. There's no question about it. They're not necessarily used to that. And so I think we're gonna fix it.
Thank you, Mr. Schrein.
Yeah, my comment, I guess, would be that they're all businesses. They might be nonprofit
Sure they are.
businesses, but they're certainly a business providing it on a nonprofit basis. But that excuse that we're not in the business just doesn't make any sense to me either. The other question that I have, though, is they probably are not very sophisticated sometimes in cash flow analysis and cash flow statements, but is there a risk that we're going to lose service providers because they have failed to be able to budget their cash and all of a sudden run into a problem where they become a liability to the county because we haven't, I don't know whether they're doing any kind of in-depth financial analysis to see about their viability to provide these services through this carrying period of time. That scares me. If they're that unsophisticated, they're probably that unsophisticated on their cash flow too.
Councilman, I don't know. I think that's a good point. But what I would just say is that we have to set the expectation. If you set the expectation that you can be a little bit loose, some people are going to be loose. If you set the expectation that this must be done, then it will eventually find its level. But it depends what our level of tolerance is for these things, and we have tolerated it, and that's why I think that it's happened. I think it'll correct itself if we weed it out at the outset.
All right, any other discussion on this point?
Madam President? Yes. I'd like to hear from the courts. And they've acknowledged some of these things, and they've made comments in Board of Controls, and I'd like to at least let them be on the record.
Good evening, Madam Chair, County Council members. My name is Marita Kavalak. I'm the court administrator. And I really don't have too much to offer. I think a lot of ground was actually covered by Councilwoman Simon and the detailed comments given by Mr. Fitzgerald. What I think I should say, though, is that we have been acutely aware for quite some time that this has not been the best thing for anybody, and we have not expended any time whatsoever trying to point a finger or assign blame. We have been at the table trying to figure out what is the best way to fix all of this so that services aren't interrupted, so that we don't have to repeatedly appear before you or the boards of control, and so that our vendors can be paid. And I'm pleased to say that I think we've made some remarkable progress. Unless something is already in the queue, I don't think you're going to get anything coming from the juvenile court that is 5 months after the contracts have actually started. We have already streamlined our process. We have taken full responsibility over the things we have control with. And the meeting of the minds that we had last week about the new master agreement, particularly for board and care, residential treatment, and shelter care services, is going to be a godsend to us all. I actually have for you a flow chart for what we have done, again, for the things about which we have control. And I also attached for you a timeline for one of the sets of contracts that's before you. You'll see that there's really no terribly glaring delay in anything, but for the fact that we probably started the process way too late. So what we have already done is doubled or tripled the trigger that commences the whole process. So hopefully, prayerfully, this is the last time all of us have to have this conversation, and I really do believe that's the case. I'll leave these with Councilwoman Simon. Sure, with Jean. Happy to share all the facts as we know them, and happy to have the opportunity to let you know how grateful we are for the collective efforts and what we have been able to do to date.
I think you can give it to clerk.
Thanks.
Mr. Shrine?
As long as you're up there, do you have an aging date that you actually target and have a goal for your process to go from beginning to end?
It's 6 months. 6 months if there's no RFP.
Right.
I'm sorry.
8 to 9.
It's 8 to 9 months if we have to do an RFP. If it's merely an amendment, it's 6 months.
From start to finish?
Yes. Which is double and triple what we've been operating under.
That's a goal?
This is what we've implemented. This is what we've started.
Is that a goal? Is that's your best case goal to actually to target?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. All right. Are any discussion on this point? All right, all those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, the ayes have it. Item
Thank you.
0092. Thank you, Ms. Cadillac.
Resolution number 2012-0092, a resolution making awards on requisition number 21516 to various providers for residential treatment services for the period February 1st, 2012 through January 31st, 2014, authorizing the county executive to execute the contracts and all other documents consistent with said awards in this resolution, and declaring the necessity that this resolution become immediately effective for the providers and in the amounts as printed on the agenda, items F 1 through 14.
Move to adopt.
Moved by Ms. Simon and seconded by Mr. Jones. Any discussion on this matter?
President, obviously, we still have the same issue with this contract dating back to February 2012, but we addressed that in the last discussion. What's significant about this group of providers is number 8, which is Glen Mills Schools, and I know there's been questions about that particular placement. Again, since we started this process of the new government, but in the Justice Affairs Committee last meeting, we brought in a graduate, or the juvenile court did, of Glen Mills Schools, who came in, and we spent a considerable amount of time talking about what's unique about that facility, why it's important, and thought it was, we approved it out of committee, and the student that came in, the youth, was quite impressive with what he was able to accomplish at that place. This is a special place for a small group of more difficult youth who are hard to place here and really have unique needs. And this is the place where they get most of what they need to move on. So there was some question about whether the judges have a special, sending them, but it's a more complicated process than one judge. It's a committee that would recommend where these children should go. So if somebody from the court can just come up briefly to reiterate what I just stated and maybe a recap of what we heard, because I know there's been questions ongoing, and I don't mind certainly having another hearing on Glen Mills.
Yeah, I just continue to ask the same question. We are literally sending millions of dollars to this place in Pennsylvania. Right. This is another $720,000. These children are going far away from our jurisdiction. It seems to me that we should be able to find some place in Ohio. I mean, Philadelphia is a long way, and I know you tell me they get a bus, and I mean, how do the children get to visit their family? Or
President? We did spend, unfortunately, all those questions that you've been posing were addressed at our meeting, and I know you couldn't make it, so that was we spent a lot of time, and these children often don't have the ties to the family here, and they don't have that significant connection. We talked at length about that, the concern that they're far away, they don't have family contact, but Glen Mills does provide certain ways to have contact. But I want you to speak to the uniqueness of the children that would be going and what's provided and why it's simply just not here.
Madam President, thank you once again. Marita Cadillac, Court Administrator. The young 17-year-old that did testify before Councilwoman Simon's committee was scheduled to be with us tonight. Unfortunately, a couple hours ago, he called to say he was unable to participate, and for that, we are quite disappointed. We would love for you to have heard the impact that this specific residential treatment center has had on him, as well as the dozens and dozens of juveniles that we have sent. The court has actually been under contract with Glen Mills since 1983. To summarize once again for you, we place males and females ages 11 through 18. They come to our court with a significant range of issues, things such as sex offending behavior, mental illness, developmental disabilities, substance abuse and dependence, and histories of trauma that include but not are limited to physical and sexual victimization, abuse, and neglect. You have to keep in mind that we cannot place a 12-year-old with a 17-year-old or a sex offender with a youth that has developmental disabilities. We place kids following assessment where they have the best chance of being successful, but also according to the age and needs. One population that we struggle with, that the nation struggles with more than any other, are the older, very aggressive, very violent youth who also have limited family ties and who are way, way behind educationally. So what we do, and what most jurisdictions around the country do, is they release RFPs for this very specific group of children that I've just identified. They're usually 17, high felonies, very aggressive, very low academic achievement. We, in the past three to 6 years, have released 2 RFPs for this distinct group of children, and only Glen Mills has responded. They have a long history working with our youth. As I indicated, we have had a contract with them so that we could have something for these juveniles since 1983. For most of these juveniles, no one in town, no one in Ohio would even accept them, and ODYS is the most viable other alternative. We try not to send juveniles to ODYS any longer. 10 years ago, there were 425 juveniles placed by us in ODYS. Last year, 175. This year, it looks like it's going to be 123. That's a really good piece of information to share. That's really good data to share. ODYS kids, for the most part, do not come out as a success story. Within 1 year, most graduates of ODYS, 30% of them, I should say, have already re-entered the system. Within 2 years, it's 60%. And as the kids get older, they're more likely to become part of the Department of Corrections. I've explained why we prefer Glen Mills over ODYS. What I should also share with you is that what they do offer the kids is incredible vocational training, because we know that they're probably not going to get very far with school. There are 30-some vocational tracks that they offer. In 2011, we had 21 youth discharged from Glen Mills. 19 finished the program successfully. 1 was unsuccessful, and 1 was discharged for medical reasons. Today, now this is only 6 months past, so I can't give you very detailed kind of recidivism records, But today, 17 of those 19 youth are still doing fine, and they're still in the community. We completely hear the concern about how is there any kind of family interaction when the juveniles are so far from home. Again, it's very important to note that most of these kids have limited or absolutely no family ties. What they are in need of is much more of a direction that is going to give them some sense of independent living. However, if there is any kind of family, parent, or guardian, the youth at Glen Mills have weekly phone sessions, and now more and more they're actually having Skype sessions. They have at least 3 home visits per year, and although distance is clearly an obstacle for the few that do have an interested and engaged family member, the family is welcome to come to Glen Mills any weekend. In addition, please note that we're not insensitive to the distance, and particularly if there is any kind of family tie or if there is any kind of strengths that we can build upon in the family, we would probably reconsider sending them to Glen Mills. We're very, very, very deliberate about who we send there. One final thing, we too have to be as fiscally prudent as anybody else who is a part of county government. The ODYS per diem cost is $338. Glen Mills is $131. It's a lot less money, and in a lot of ways, we believe it's dollars much better spent.
About
Thank
how
you.
many children do you have there right now?
As of the end of May 21.
What's the average length of stay?
11 months.
All right, any other questions?
And Madam President,
All right, go ahead, Mr. Jones and Mr. Gallagher.
I just wanted to echo the comments of Councilwoman Simon and the courts. I was concerned about the distance too over the past few months, but after meeting the young man, meeting his aunt, she was fully supportive of him, and they were not concerned about the distance. And that young man is on the right track, and the services that they provided, I'm convinced that they have done a good job in this instance, despite the distance. So I'm supportive of this contract and ask my colleagues to support it also.
Thank you, Mr. Gallagher.
Who's the final say as to who goes and who goes ODYS?
Well, anytime that there is a consideration for residential placement, the matter goes before our, it's called the Alternative Case Plan Committee, or before the Ohio Department of Youth Services Alternative Committee, which is actually chaired by Judge Thomas O'Malley. That group makes a recommendation. In the vast majority of cases, whatever is recommended is what is adopted by the judge. Ultimately, though, judges have authority, responsibility, and discretion, and they can make ultimate choices.
And I may be wrong, but I seem to recall there's at least one judge over there that makes the majority of these sends to Pennsylvania. Would I be incorrect in that?
Well, let me give you the statistics as of May 29th. Judge O'Malley had 2 juveniles. Retenio Rucker, who's a magistrate, had 1. Jeffrey Airbar had 2.
Who are these magistrates for?
Magistrate Retenio Rucker works for Judge Allison Floyd. Magistrate Jeffrey Airbar works for Judge Sweeney. He had 2. Judge Kristen Sweeney had 4. Magistrate Peter Murray, who works for Judge Patrick F. Corrigan, had 2. Magistrate Tess Neff, who was assigned to Judge Thomas O'Malley, had 2. Judge Allison Floyd had 8.
She just kind of get the short end of the stick, or?
I'm sorry?
How does she double everybody?
I would be hypothesizing.
See, the great concern I've had, and I'll be very upfront with this.
Please do.
Is I've heard that there's preferential treatment, that Judge Floyd likes to send people there with the advice or the request of the families. And I don't know if that's going on or not, but if it is, there's a problem.
I don't know really how to comment or respond except to reiterate that there are processes. And the vast majority of recommendations that are made by the ACP or the ODYS Review Committee are summarily adopted by the jurist who is responsible for that child.
Thank you.
All right, any other discussion on this point? All right, all those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, the ayes have it.
We thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kavlik. Item 0093.
Resolution number 2012-0093, a resolution authorizing an agreement with Cuyahoga County District Board of Health in the amount not to exceed $553,000 for the newborn home visiting program for the period April 1, 2012 through February 1, 2013, authorizing the county executive to execute the contract and all other documents consistent with this resolution, and declaring the necessity that this resolution become immediately effective.
Approval.
Moved by Mr. Brady and seconded by Mr. Miller. Any discussion on this?
Madam Chairperson, this agreement provides for newborn home visits by registered nurses. This will allow for approximately 2,200 visits in this time frame. Most of this is Health and Human Service levy money, but $100,000 of it, I want to mention, did come from the Mount Sinai Foundation.
All right, any other discussion? All right, all those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, the ayes have it. Item 0094.
Resolution number 2012-0094, a resolution making an award on requisition number 22685 to MHS Incorporated in the amount not to exceed $1,034,798 for transitional housing program services for the period June 1, 2012 through March 31, 2013, authorizing the county executive to execute the contract and all other documents consistent with said award in this resolution, and declaring the necessity that this resolution become immediately effective.
Move approval.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Brady and seconded by Mr. Miller. Any discussion on this one?
Madam Chairperson, I just want to say that, this is for the Maine Men's Homeless Shelter, and the council and the county government and the citizens should be proud of the job that this government does on this issue. The reason we don't have a lot of homeless folks wandering around the city of Cleveland is not just because it looks bad, but because they're not out there. They're being helped, and they have been helped for a long time. A lot of people have dedicated a large part of their lives to this for several years, and the new county government is committed to performing this task as it has been, and to improve it in any way we can.
All right, thank you. Any other discussion? All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, the ayes have it. Item 0095.
Resolution number 2012-0095, a resolution making awards on requisition number 21578 to various providers for various services for the Cuyahoga Options for Elders program for the period July 1, 2012 through June 30, 2014, authorizing the county executive to execute the contracts and all other documents consistent with said awards in this resolution, and declaring the necessity that this resolution become immediately effective for the services, the providers, and in the amounts not to exceed as printed on the agenda, items I-1 through 6.
Move approval.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Brady and seconded by Mr. Schrein. Mr. Brady, do you want to be heard on this one?
Just that this is for a variety of services for senior citizens. You'll see them broken out. The total amount is $3,849,000, and it's totally funded by the Health and Human Service levy.
Okay, any discussion on this? All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Item 0096.
Resolution number 2012-0096, a resolution making awards on requisition number 22613 to various providers for job readiness, job search, job placement, and job retention services for the period July 1, 2012 through June 30, 2013, and authorizing the county executive to execute the contracts and all other documents consistent with said awards in this resolution, with the providers and in the amounts not to exceed as printed on the agenda, items J1 and 2.
Move approval.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Brady and seconded by Mr. Miller. Anything on these items, Mr. Brady?
Just that This job placement program is really evolved from the Welfare to Work initiative from the 90s, and it is federally funded.
All right, any other discussion? All right, all those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, the ayes have it. Item 16, consideration of ordinance of first reading referral to committee, item 0015.
Ordinance number 2012-0015, an ordinance amending ordinance number 2011-0014 as amended, which enacted the Cuyahoga County Contracting and Purchasing Procedures Ordinance and declaring the necessity that this ordinance become immediately effective.
This is going to go to Public Works.
Ordinance number 2012-0016, an ordinance providing for adoption of various changes to the Cuyahoga County non-bargaining classification plan and declaring the necessity that this ordinance become immediately effective.
This will go to Human Resources. Item 17, consideration of an ordinance for third reading adoption, item 0012.
Ordinance number 2012-0012, an ordinance establishing the Department of Information Technology under the direction of a Chief Information Officer who shall serve at the pleasure of the county executive and declaring the necessity that this ordinance become immediately effective.
Move approval.
All right, moved by Mr. Schron and seconded by Mr. Miller. All right, any discussion on this?
Madam President.
Yes.
This item renames the department to the Department of Information Technology. It provides for the organization of subunits within that department and also gives ordinance status to the Technical Advisory Committee as reconstituted.
All right.
Madam President?
Yes, Mr. Greenspan.
I have an amendment to the ordinance to present.
All right, go ahead.
All right, I believe each member of council has a copy of the amendment.
All right, do you want to read the amendment? Is it in the packet or?
It was a loose document.
Okay.
The amendment, Madam President, further clarifies under Section 7, the Technical Advisory Committee. During committee hearings, it was suggested that Director Mowry further identify the members of the TAC, which this amendment reflects. So the item on page 2, section 7, further adds language as to who the representatives of the TAC will be. And they will be a member from the Board of Elections, a representative from the Court of Common Pleas, and a representative from the County Prosecutor's Office. That represents the current members of the TAC. This just codifies current practice of the department.
Madam Chairperson,
Yes.
I'd like to hear someone from the administration comment on this amendment.
All right. Do we need a second?
Yeah, we do.
All right, so it's moved by the amendment is moved by Mr. Greenspan and seconded by Mr. Schron. Mr. Mowry?
Yeah, Jeff Mowry, Chief Information Officer. The changes to the amendment was just to clarify, we have members of the TAC under the Executive's Office. We have members of myself, my Chief Technology Officer, my Security Manager. We felt during the hearings that it made sense to clarify the members outside of the Executive's control, which included the court, Prosecutor's Office, and the Board of Election as members in the actual ordinance itself.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions of Mr. Mowry? Mr. Rogers?
So there, I'm sorry, Mr. Mowry, or to Mr. Greenspan, this change is in addition to people that are, is it this amendment does not include everyone that is a member of the TAC? Or is it all inclusive of?
Yeah, it does not include every member. We felt that under the county executive that we would have some flexibility as IT managers under my direction. We could bring in IT managers as required. It's a 11-member group that looks at all these set standards,
looks at all the IT contracts before it comes forward to either your office or the county executives for approval.
Essentially, you're saying these are essential parts of the system, and that you want to the amendment, a mandate that these particular people be a part of this committee.
Exactly.
Is that essentially what it is?
Yes.
Mr. Schrein?
And the reason for mandating these three is from the user group, or because they bring expertise to the subject matter?
I think a little bit of both. I mean, they bring some expertise as to what's going on in the courts, what's going on at Board of Elections into the group. The Board of Elections and the courts, those IT groups don't necessarily work directly for me under the ordinance. So this is also a way to make sure that we have a common IT strategy amongst those groups that don't report directly into the county executive.
But the name of the group is called Technical
Advisory Committee.
It's not User Advisory Group. And so that seems to me that I don't understand what the technical expertise these three would be bringing to this per se, as opposed to being users of the knowledge that you need to have, and so makes you want to get their input, but not necessarily bring the technical expertise that a technical advisory group. When I think of a technical advisory group, it would be someone with expertise in the subject matter as opposed to a user of that technology.
Oh, I see. Yeah, these specifically individuals that are on it are technical in nature. So they are, for example, the Board of Elections is their IT managers. That's part of it.
Okay,
so
that's not very specific from the way the amendment is worded here.
No,
it just says a representative, so you could have theoretically anybody from the Board of Elections representing these three individuals.
As opposed to language that would say the lead technology officer or director.
Right. I mean, that's what seems to me.
You're right.
This could be just as easily giving you user group information that I need X amount of horsepower, as opposed to this is the technical horsepower I need to have to support my function.
But we can make an amendment right now to replace the word representative with lead technology.
I think that
manager.
I think a representative is sufficient, because you may have different people on a different day. I mean, I think that that's enough leeway. It says generally who we want. I mean, the Board of Elections is a separate entity, the court is a separate branch of government, the prosecutor is a separately elected individual. So, I mean, I understand the logic for this, but I think a representative is sufficient. I don't think we need to make any more.
I mean, I'm open either way. I mean, I would expect that whomever heads up each of these organizations would send the most competent person available to discuss the subject matter. So if there's a motion, I'll entertain it. If not, I'm fine with it as is. Further clarity is always better, but I would defer to the director as to what he may request.
I think it's okay as it is from my perspective. We work with the law office to craft the changes, so I think we're okay.
All right. Is there any other discussion on the amendment? All those in favor of the amendment indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, the ordinance would be so amended. Is there any other discussion on the merits of the entire ordinance?
Madam Chair?
Yes.
You know, when you go out to speak to different groups, you try to find out the bragging things about what this county's done that has been exceptional. And in particular, I've never failed to mention how this county government has taken the technology and we're moving forward and getting coordinated, and how dysfunctional it was prior. And in particular, I always mention the wonderful director that we have and his background. So this is a major bragging point, and so I'd like to add my name. I'm really proud of what this has accomplished.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I'll add my name as well.
And Mr. Miller? All right, any other discussion on this? I know this has been a lot of hard work in the formation of this, so congratulate everyone for a lot of hard work. All right, all those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, the ayes have it.
Madam President?
Yes.
And there are some downsides to Jeff Mowry I could talk about after the But You know, there really is a deep story here about some things that are happening. Everything from the ERP process that we haven't really talked about a lot publicly, but if there's a council committee that wants to talk with Jeff and the rest of the team that's starting to look at this ERP process, I find it fascinating, and it's related to some of the stuff we were talking about earlier with contracting, but also a lot of other things. There's also some really interesting stories about the number of IT people you have kind of per capita in a system, and what's the norm in the private sector and a big corporation, and what's the norm in a government system, and where we are right now. And there's some real success stories with that. And Jeff has been a great member of the team, and this kind of is kind of puts the icing on some of what he's been working on here with this official department reorganization. But there's a really important story to be told there. What he's doing in the city of Parma with a pilot project there, the discussions that we're having with other county agencies that are independent agencies like the Adams Board and Developmental Disabilities, where we're having discussions with them. And that full story has not been told yet. And if there's, we're continuing to work on it, but there are going to be, I have no doubt that within a year or so that this county on the IT side is going to be the state of the art, because it's also happening in terms of management and workflow and the organizational chart, and also what we're doing with moving things to the cloud and our data center and our servers and reducing servers and reducing hundreds of printers, and all these things are happening at the same time. And it really is, I think, going to be a signature accomplishment. And I thank you, Chuck, for the compliment.
All right, thank you. Item 18, the miscellaneous committee reports. Do you have any miscellaneous committee reports? Mr. Greenspan, and we'll just go around.
Thank you, Madam President. The charter review portion of my committee, obviously we're in full swing. We have, as items were sent to committee of the whole, June 14th, this Thursday at 7 p.m., we have the Western County Town Hall meeting in Olmsted Township at the German American Club. I'll just go over the next three items. June 26th, we'll have a committee of the whole meeting, and we'll work out with Councilmember Schron as far as the timing of our meetings. They'll be on the same day between 1 and 4:30. Between the two of us, we'll have our committee of the whole meeting to start hearing the proposed charter amendments. And on June 28th at 7 p.m. in Shaker Heights at the Stephanie Tubbs Jones Center will be the eastern portion of the county's town hall meeting to discuss proposed charter amendments.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Miller?
Madam Chair and my colleagues, the Finance Committee will meet next Monday on the 18th at 1 p.m., our usual time. It's a long agenda. We're going to have the tax budget, the Veteran Service Commission budget, the Veteran Service Commission leftovers reallocation ordinance, the two food service contracts, and we're going to try to do the ERP presentation that the executive just alluded to.
Right, anything else?
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I guess I'm full of all kinds of pride tonight, but as I said previously, last night I was invited back to Parma City Council to address them, and the big part of the evening was a presentation by the Public Works Department concerning all the work that they are doing and planning for sanitary sewer and stormwater issues with the city of Parma. And there was a crew out there with Mr. Deaver, our engineer, Dylan, Mr. Schneider, and a couple others. And there was a PowerPoint, and I just watched as all these councilmen, they went through and covered about 20 different neighborhoods and had slides of what they have accomplished and the challenges that they're going to take care of. And I just had to get up after that was because I'm really proud of the job they're doing, and I emphasize the city of Parma that this is probably one of the greatest points of what our county is doing. We're not forcing people to do things, but we're showing them that working together. And the sanitary engineer, I can't think of a better program where it's making collaboration and working together. So, Bonnie, I just wanted to tell you that they were fantastic. It was really professional, and talking to the councilman afterward, it's very impressive. So I want to thank you.
Mr. Rogers?
Just an announcement, the Environment and Sustainability Committee will meet this Friday at 2:15. It's been a change in time. We usually meet at 1. Thank you. To discuss the first portion of the Cuyahoga County Educational Assistance Program. 2:15. Oh, sure. Sonny and I are presenting, and we need to talk about that, the Beyond Pesticides
loan in the amount
to talk about the legislation that this council recently passed banning the use of pesticides on county property. So we'll be meeting at 8 o'clock in the morning at the Botanical Gardens. The symposium, I guess it is, lasts from 8 until noon. So if anyone's available, it's open to the public. So I welcome all of our colleagues to attend. Again, that's 8 to noon on Friday at the Cleveland Botanical Gardens.
Ms. Simon?
Thank you. I'm going to have the Justice Affairs Committee meeting to address the contracts that are coming before us on June 22nd at 11:30 for my colleagues on the committee. Long-awaited film tomorrow, Forks Over Knives, 12 p.m. here in Chambers. So hope you guys can come. We're going to be showing it here for the Health Alliance for the employees.
So on Friday is the Fatherhood Initiative over at the Hilton Garden Inn, and I guess I'm going to be speaking on behalf of Mr. Fitzgerald and the council at 10 o'clock, so nix the other meeting. All right, any other miscellaneous business? Any public comment unrelated to the agenda? Anyone signed in?
No one has signed in to speak.
All right, our next meeting is June the 26th. Wear your comfortable clothes. We're going to have to bring in some food. We start at 1 o'clock, and we have the 2 matters for the Committee of the Whole. We have the charter review and the casino discussion, so we'll have to split that up. At 4:30, we will have a brief presentation on the MedMart, and then at 5 o'clock, we'll have our regular meeting. Right? All right, if nothing else before this council, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All right. All in favor, say aye. Stand adjourned.